No matter how low you have sunk, no matter how bleak your situation, this is not the end. This is not the end of your story. This is not the final chapter of your life. I know it may be hard right now, but if you just hang in there, stick it out, stay with me for a little while, you will find that this tough moment will pass. And if you are committed to using this pain, using it to build your character, finding a greater meaning for the pain, you will find that in time, you can turn your life around and help others going through the same struggles. The world right now is in the middle of a mental health crisis. It's estimated almost half the population suffers from depression at some stage throughout their life. Rather than join the queue, it's important we learn why we get down and then how we can change it. Because believe it or not, we create our own negative feelings, and we can also ensure that we turn our lives around and be a positive change for others. The reason anyone gets depressed always comes down to the consistent thoughts we think and the consistent beliefs we hold. Let me say that again. The reason anyone gets depressed always comes down to the consistent thoughts we think and the consistent beliefs we hold. The point here is that anyone that is depressed is so because there is an external factor that didn't materialize in their life. They have lost something outside of their control or don't have something that is out of their control. In school, we are taught how to get a job, but no one teaches us how to live in a state of happiness. No one teaches us how important our conscious and unconscious thoughts and associations are. Is our happiness not worth more than a job? Yes, it is. And before you say happiness won't pay my bills, happiness will pay your bills. When you realize you will be 10 times more energized, focused, and take positive action in your life, when you first choose to develop yourself as a priority and then get to the stuff of the world. I've seen some people who many would consider to have it all in their life because they thought they were not good enough. A thought, a belief within them told them they were not worthy. These people that many were jealous of, many envious of, were not good enough. You must value yourself enough to take the time every single day to work on you, to engage in something that will ensure you are a positive influence on the world. This, of course, doesn't mean life will suddenly be perfect. The same life challenges will show up. But if your mind is strong, if your mind is at peace, your reaction to the challenging times will be very different. Your reaction will be, how can I make this work? Not why is this happening? Not with pity, but with hope. Because your strength will become their hope, their strength. You really can be that powerful. You can ditch the victim story. You can leave the pain behind and focus on how you will react next. How you will react positively. Read all you can read to get your mind in a positive place. Take steps to ensure you will be in a better position next time. Whatever pain you are suffering from, how you can ensure it won't show again. Take little steps, and soon you will be at the top of the staircase. Don't give up. You are worthy. You are more than worthy. You deserve to experience how great life can be, and you owe it to the world to be that positive change for others, to inspire others who will look to you and say, he did it, she did it, and I can do it too.
All right, friends, I want to bless God for another opportunity to come to you and to share with you. It is day number 18 of our journey. For those of you that have been tracking with us from the time we began on the 1st of January, we are on the journey to wholeness. We are on the journey to renewal, and it is a fresh start 2021. So this week is our health. Is our mental health week, and it is such a great honor to come to you one more time. But as we begin, before I invite my guest on to come and share some good information with you, I would like for you to share with us where you are joining in from. Where you are joining in from, just comment below. Let us know where you are joining us from, and also please share the video. Invite somebody to join. Invite your friends and family. This is a conversation that goes beyond religious lines. This is a conversation that affects every fiber of our society. Each and every one of us need to really come around to hear what the information that our guest is sharing tonight. I believe that many of us are quite in the dark when it comes to where to find resources that will help us to be mentally strong, mentally stable, to achieve what God has called us to. So, yes, I'm seeing folks from Oakville. Welcome from Oakville, Ontario. I'm seeing Carlita Jones from United States of America, Buffalo, New York. Welcome, Lady Carlita. Please let us know where you are chiming in from. K.I.M Global, let us hear you. K.I.M Toronto, let us hear you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Is a new season, is a new day. Listen, this year is our year of manifesting the glory of God. For those of you that are part of our church community, you already have an idea of what I'm talking about when I say that. But for those of you that are not in the know, what that simply means is that we will be good examples for our society. So for us to be able to give our best, it means that we've got to really allow ourselves to go through a healing process. And there are many of us that are online this tonight and this morning and this evening and this afternoon, depending on where you are joining from, that could use some help. And thank God that help is here. Thank God that help is here. Mrs. Saga is present here. Toronto, Ontario. Jennifer Kutuka is online right now. We want to bless God for all that He's doing and all the amazing things that He has in store for us. Before I invite my guest up, I want to really impress this in your spirit. You see, tonight's session, I believe that many of us that have really hidden behind religion, and we've hidden behind sometimes people will say, well, I prayed about it, my pastor prayed, and all of that, all of that is good. There are situations that prayer will take care of when it's spiritual. But when you're dealing with mental health, it is important, because many of us Christians that struggle with the trauma of our past, the trauma of our childhood, it's so difficult to open up and to really get the right information that will strengthen us mentally for the journey that is ahead of us. And tonight, I am so thankful to God that He's allowed a young lady that I've been very impressed with the work she does in the community, very passionate, very knowledgeable in what she does, and knows all kinds of resources that will be helpful and beneficial to your journey. So without wasting much time, I want to introduce to you here from Niagara Falls. I believe that's Lady Nancy. It's good to have you on. And then watching from Toronto, Ontario. We want to welcome each and every one of you from St. Lucia, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, United States of America, and all of you shy folks that don't want to tell us where you are from. We want to welcome you as well. May the Lord richly bless you. And my prayer is that you find this session very informative. Without much ado, I want to introduce my guest. She holds masters in mental health, and also she's a registered social worker, and I believe that God is going to use her to be a blessing to you. Without much ado, I want to introduce my guest for tonight, Alice Afram. Alice Afram. Alice, I think your camera's out. If you can turn your camera on. The world is ready for you, Alice. The world is ready for you. Where are you, Alice? The
All
world
right.
for you. Praise God. All right, all
Let's
right, all right.
see.
I think Alice's camera. Alice, I think your camera is still off.
Disable camera. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Let's see. It says it's on, so let's try this again.
Right. So, folks, as Alice is getting her camera situated, or maybe you can come out of the room and come back in. Maybe
Okay,
that
let me
might
do that really quickly.
Yes. So, folks, I am sure that as you are preparing, just send the video, invite people to join. Send it on WhatsApp, send it on Facebook, share on your walls. This is the kind of information that your friends and your cousins and your aunties and the people you know that are acting crazy. That sometimes you don't even know why they're acting that way. Hear me. There are a lot of people that are carrying baggage from their past and from situations that they've been through that they just don't know how to express that and how to get healing. And for that matter, they lash out at any opportunity they get. They lash out at people. They lash out at loved ones. You reaching out to them in love, but what you get back is just pure lashing out. And my prayer is that Alice, your camera. My prayer, my hope is that this session will give you all the information you need. All right, all right, all right. It looks like Alice is good to go now. So without much ado, well, Alice, we want to especially welcome you to our week, our mental health week. And I believe that this was the doing of the Lord. You see, our guest
Right.
speaker for tonight, somehow she wasn't able to make it. She has a bereavement in her family, and our thoughts and our prayers go to her. We've been praying for her today, but I believe that in God's plan, He knew that you are going to be here and you are going to be our resource person to give us all the information that we need as we journey on in the year 2021. There is so many of us that have goals and aspirations and dreams, and we believe that the information that you are here to present will help us so that down the road we're not going to have meltdowns. While we're at
Mm-hmm.
the verge of our breakthrough, we're not going to have meltdowns and act
Oh,
stupid on
yes.
camera. So, Alice, welcome, welcome, welcome,
Thank you.
folks. K.I.M, can we welcome Alice to the house? Come on,
Thank
let's show
you.
her
Thank
some
you.
love,
Thank you.
even as she comes on to present us all that good information. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So,
Thank
Alice,
you.
I'm going to step out of the way, introduce yourself,
Okay.
tell us, give us all that great information that you've been sharing with the community. And at the end of your presentation, we will take all the questions on the side and
Okay.
we'll bring the questions to you so that you can give us some answers. There are many people with different situations that are waiting for the right information so that they can start their healing process. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, Alice Afram. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, Pastor Obi, for allowing me to share some time with you all today. So, my name is Alice Afram, and I am a registered social worker. I do hold a master's in social work where I have specialized in mental health and addictions. So that's it's pretty much been my passion, and I've been working in the field for over 10 years. I've had the opportunity to work in, a wide array of areas. So, from children in the school board, to I've actually had the opportunity to work in Ghana overseas for a couple of years with women and children there, and then locally actually with some hospitals and the policing system. So, my passion's always been mental health, and I think, as a Black woman, not only my own lived experiences, but the experiences of many around me. So that includes, my family and my friends. I think it's imperative that we, have these conversations. Let's talk about what's really happening in our lives, right? That sometimes the things that we're unable to articulate, to within our own systems comfortably, right? For fear of being ridiculed or any stigmas that may underline. So that's myself. So again, it's not going to be anything formal. I do have some resources that I will be sharing with Pastor Obi, and I will have him push that out to the group after. But if you do have any questions, feel free, just put them in the chat, as I am speaking, if anything comes to you, just jot it down there. And at the end, we will have like a question answer period as well. So that way, everybody's kind of, if you're having anything, if there's a burning question that you're having, I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. Or if you're looking for a certain resource as well, I'll be able to touch on that too, just in case I don't touch on it in my presentation. So, um, you know, I just want to kind of begin with, stigma. Like, what is that, right? When we think of stigma, people always talk about stereotypes and things like that. Like, what is stigma and what does that mean to us, right? And what is stigma when it pertains to mental health, particularly? You know, when we understand what mental health is, stigma is a huge contributing factor as to why an individual may either engage in services or not engage in services. Stigma is a negative connotation that is linked to something. So it can be linked to your health, it can be linked to your race, it can be linked to your mental health, it can be linked to your physical health. But stigma is anything negative that is linked to a particular part of yourself that you identify with. So when we talk about mental health stigma, particularly in the Black culture, in the racialized culture, it's one of those things that it's seldomly spoken about. Right. If any of us is ever experiencing, mental health challenges, right? What is the likelihood that we actually have the ability, to engage in services? To who do we go to, right? What do we say, right? Where do we go, right? A lot of those are some of the questions that a lot of us do have, right? And I find that, you know, for myself living in, born and raised in Toronto, um, there were still a lot of things that I wasn't privy to, right? And, throughout my schooling and my work experience and my lived experiences, I've been able to, learn so much more that I'm just passionate about sharing with other individuals like myself, right? And again, it's nothing that is particularly specific to living in Toronto, but a lot of it is by the color of our skin, right? By that factors such as even our culture, right, or even religion, right? How do all those factors contribute to our mental health? So when we understand what mental health is, right? Mental health is the well-being of a person almost holistically, right? So we talk about physical health is like, your ability to obviously eat well, feel good, you know, are your muscles moving, physically inside? Like, are your blood levels good? Are your sugar levels good? When we think of physical health, those are the things that we think of. When we think of mental health, we think of things like your thoughts, your emotions, right? The way in which our we are able to rationalize things, the way in which we're able to interpret things, right? All those things contribute to something that we call our mental health. Um, One of the biggest struggles is that when our mental health begins to be affected, it may not be one isolated situation. And I think that that's one thing that I really want us to understand is that, if anybody ever starts to exhibit any type of mental health symptoms, one of the things that we need to understand is that it may not be one isolated situation that has caused this, emotional dysregulation, but it may be a compound of things. And I think that we all understand that sometimes it's not necessarily you having one bad day that makes you feel a certain way, but sometimes it's that it's been a bad week, right? And maybe just on Friday, that last thing that person has said to you has just kind of put you over the edge, right? Similar to that, that's how our mental health is affected. Mental health can also be genetic, right? So there's also a predisposition compound factor compounded in there. So, case in point, if somebody in my family, so if my mom or my dad struggled with something like anxiety or depression, I'm at a higher risk for having or experiencing, symptoms of anxiety or depression, or anything like that in the future. So mental health can either be things caused by the environment or it could be things caused by genetics. So sometimes it's a combination of the two. Um, when we think about the our first mental health experiences, kids experience mental health at a young age, and I think that that's one of the things that we seldomly discuss because sometimes we always stomach things up to behaviors, right? But a child's behavior will tell you a lot of things, right? Especially how they're feeling. And the responses that we give to children will either help shape positive experiences for them and create something we call resiliency. So your ability to cope with things and kind of move through difficult situations, or it'll kind of cause a dysregulation. So your inability to cope with stressful situations. And that's one of the things, and I think a lot of us, especially in the racialized communities, now more than ever, we're starting to see the effects of that, right? And again, for a number of reasons. One, because of some of the things that have happened historically to our communities, right? But two, also is it's the effects that the historical things that have happened in our communities have had on the older generation. So when I'm thinking of the generation before me, I'm thinking of people like my parents. What kind of experiences did they have that shaped their mental health or their overall well-being that has now it may now be affecting mine. So we have to understand that there's been a lot of trauma when it comes to the racialized communities, and by virtue of a lot of that trauma that hasn't been addressed, a lot of that stuff is passed down, right? It's passed down from generation to generation. So that's what we call the cycle of trauma, right? Is that it's repeated. It may not necessarily be repeated in the same way. So the way in which maybe my parents act may not be the same way I act. But again, a lot of the things that I experienced there may shape certain experiences for me in the future to come. So we need to understand that something doesn't come out of nothing. So when we understand that there's been a lot of things that have happened, maybe geographically. So maybe people have moved around. So you've moved from one country to another. Where in this new country you went from being a majority to a minority in this new country. What kind of effects do those things have on you, right? As a racialized community, that's one of the things that I think we discredit a lot. We don't talk about is the displacement, right? A lot of us have moved around the world over the last, I would say, 30 to 50 years. There's been a lot of movement around the world of racialized people, right? And, as we've gone to a lot of these new countries, it's us trying to create an identity for ourselves, right? Trying to create a footing, trying to create community, trying to find a sense of belonging, right? And in that sense of belonging, again, there's a lot of stress that some of us were not ready for, right? Or we're not cognizant that we were going to be exposed to. So now, we built these lives in these new spaces. There's a lot of stress. How do we cope with that? What sometimes when you're at least in your environment that you're comfortable with, you kind of have your support network there. But when you're taken from that supportive network and you're put into a space where you know nobody, you have no resources, where you're kind of alone, you know, um, your ability to cope, that resiliency that I was talking about, is really key. So like I said, kind of, digressing back, depending on how your childhood was, your upbringing was, were there traumatic events there, what kind of helped shape whether or not um, this new move, where you've gone to, will be successful for you, will be stressful for you, or if you'll be able to kind of move through it freely. So now, we're in new places, we're creating a new sense of identity. There's a lot of things that we're trying to kind of gain our footing in. How does that affect us? Right. So there's those things there. Sometimes even the pressures, right? The pressures of our family members, the pressures from our communities, right? To be successful or to be something or somebody that maybe, we are not ready for, right? Or we are not equipped for, can affect our mental health, right? So, when we think about mental health, it may not just be one area or the other, but sometimes a lot of it is it's just compounding. It's, I have stress from this end, I have stress from this end, it's all pulling at me, and we're only one, you're one person, you're one individual, right? So how are we able to kind of work through that, understand it, and cope with it? Rightfully so. Just historically, when it comes to mental health, right, a lot of these things are not talked about in our various communities, right? For myself, being of Ghanaian descent, it's something that I know, having worked back home in Ghana, it wasn't talked about readily, available. That information wasn't readily available, at least at that time when I was working there, than it is now. Right. And again, a lot of it is because there is a cultural component to it, right? Not only a cultural component, but there's also a religious component to it, right? And I think because of that, sometimes it's created a lot of these stigmas that we talked about at the beginning, that have kind of helped shape how a person is able to engage, or how a person's able even to bring up that conversation. So I find that, because there's a lot of these various components, when we talk about our religious and our cultural components, a lot of people kind of shy away from these conversations because it's something that we've never had to discuss, right? But fast forward to 2021, right? There's so many mental health campaigns out there. There's so much awareness out there that's talking about, that's encouraging people to come forward and encouraging us to talk about these things, that it's causing that shift, right? And I find for the younger generations, we're really promoting those things. So I work in the school boards right now, and that's one of the things that we're really promoting for especially the young Black youth, right? Is promoting this conversation around, it's okay to talk about your mental health. It's okay to get help for your mental health. It's okay, right? And also equipping their caregivers, right? The older generation, their family members, their parents, right? With the tools as to how to foster a healthy, environment for this individual to be able to come forward, right? And kind of helping them break down some of the stigmas that are associated to mental health, right? Again, a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people don't engage in it because of the stigmas, socially, culturally, religiously, that may be associated. And again, when we think of a lot of the strengths and the supports that kind of keep a person going, it's things like their community, right? It's things like their cultural community. It's things like their religious community, their church groups. It's things like, socially, like their friends, right? So if those circles are not supportive when it comes to discussing or talking about mental health, it is hard for an individual to come forward, right? But thankfully, there's so many, like I said, there's so many campaigns out, but there's so many avenues in which an individual can actually engage in the mental health system, or engage in mental health supports that are anonymous, right? That are confidential, that are safe, right? Myself as a clinician, right? I pride myself in creating a safe space for an individual, to be able to come forward and share their experiences, and just ask for help, right? If I'm not able to provide them the support that I feel that they need, then, as a clinician, I'm going to then refer you to the supports that I know that may be beneficial to you, right? But I'm still going to follow you in that journey and ensure that, the supports that you are engaging in are useful and are supportive. So one of the things that we want to talk about is, where do we go? Right? Where does one go when they want to talk about mental health, when they want to gather information, or they want to seek support, right? Ideally, the first place would always be this to be our support system, right? It's the people that you're most comfortable with, is the individuals that you want to go to first, right? You want to think about, do you have a really close circle of friends, right? That you can freely discuss things with, right? That would be a great place to start. What about your family members? What about your church family? If it's a colleague, right? That's also a great place to start. But for those individuals who may have those circles, those supportive networks, but don't feel totally comfortable discussing those things with them, a great place to start is something like your family doctor. A lot of people don't know that family doctors have a lot of supports when it comes to mental health. A lot of people don't understand or don't know that their family doctors have these supports, but they do. The best place, because again, when somebody's in a crisis, when you're sick or anything like that, you usually call the family doctor. It's either you go to a hospital or you call your doctor, right? So a great place to start would be your family doctor, right, as well, because he or she will be able to connect you through their own circle, their own professional circles, to an individual, or to the right clinics, or even themselves. A lot of family doctors also have mental health designations, right? They've undergone a lot of trainings, they understand mental health, and they'd be able to help you themselves. So, you know um, outside of your family, your friends, your social support, your familial support, a great place to start would be your family doctor, right? And again, most of us have had our family doctors for quite some time, so we're able to freely go to them and kind of have some of these conversations, right? So that's a great place to start. Another place to start is a lot of the places that we reside in have online platforms, right? So whether it be a mental health service online where it's completely anonymous, or even a telephone. A lot of the telephone mental health services are completely anonymous. They don't take your number or anything like that. In consider The only time that your information may be shared is if you do disclose that self-harm. So if there is a risk factor there, then that's where these services will go out of their way to obviously either ping your IP address or try and trace back the number, because they're going to call the emergency services. They are going to call the ambulance or the police to come and do a check on you, right? But that, in all honesty, I've worked at both services. I've worked in the hospital system and I've worked in the community system. Um, working a mental health crisis line, I want to say maybe out of 100 callers, we probably called the police on one, right? Because a lot of people are just, they're not having an imminent mental health crisis that will cause some sort of mental health, like cause some sort of risk or bodily harm to themselves or somebody close to them, but it's just an outlet. They need an outlet to talk to an individual and kind of work through some of their thoughts. So yeah, so again, so like I said, number one would be would be your family, your friends, social networks. Number two, family doctor. Number three would be like an online forum, right? An online or telephone forum, right? And again, the internet and social media is so advanced today that if you do even a quick Google search, a lot of things will come up, right? And like I said, I kind of have a few resources down. So if there's certain areas that you want myself to gather some more resources and stuff for, like I said, put it in the chat box. I can do a quick search. I can do some stuff through. I can make some cold calls, and I can update that list and send it to Pastor Obi as well. Outside of that, if we're talking about a serious mental health episode, so if either yourself or an individual is experiencing a serious mental health episode, so whether you feel like this person, is severely depressed, like they haven't left their house, their thrive to live is low, they're not taking care of themselves, they've expressed something like suicidal ideation, um, or that they may do harm to somebody else, those are risk factors. Those are red flags, right? Um, One of the things that you want to do in those situations, the first thing you want to do is you want to ensure that you will be safe, and you also want to ensure that the person is in a safe space. Um, why I say that you yourself have to assess your sense of safety is that sometimes we always want to lend a helping hand to another person, but we put ourselves in danger. And again, I am the best version of me when I am grounded. So if you yourself are not in a safe space, you're not in a safe environment, you're not grounded, you will not be helpful to anybody who's experiencing any type of crisis. So you need to ensure that you yourself, you're grounded, you're in a safe space before you assess if somebody else is in need of help. Okay, so you want to assess if you're in a safe space, and then you want to assess if the person's in a safe space. That being said, if a person is exhibiting or disclosing to you in confidence that, they are experiencing, they're feeling a certain way, they think they may do something to hurt themselves or somebody else, you know, what I always tell people, and again, I'm always open and honest with all my patients and my clients, is I tell them, like, I'm concerned, right? It's always starting with that. It's always letting them know that, I'm concerned, like this is not like you, or, I'm concerned because I've been noticing this change in you, right? Because then it puts a little bit of the onus back on the person for them to understand that your concerns are genuine, right? You're here because you want to help. So I always tell them, like, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that, something bad may happen. So I want to get you some help, right? At least right there, you've given them the information that you yourself may not be the person to help them, but you may need to get other individuals involved, right? So whatever happens next, at least that person's kind of been given the heads up, or they've been privy to what you may or may not do. In the case where an individual is experiencing some sort of imminent mental health crisis, there are a few things that we can do. So like I said, family, friends, if you're safe, if this person works in the profession of mental health or addictions and they can help, great. The second place would be the family doctor. But if there is an imminent risk factor, we can do one of two things, right? I know that there's a lot of stigma around police involvement, and rightfully so, because there are a lot of things when it comes to that institution that is set up to oppress racialized individuals. But however, I think it's about understanding the system and how do we make the system work for ourselves. So having worked with the police, one of the things that we can do here, so again, within like the Canadian system, it's pretty standard. And even actually internationally. So I know in America, it's pretty standard too, but sometimes it's the way in which we initiate the call. So what you can do is a lot of the local police stations and the local police forces have created mental health teams. So you can place a call to the police, to police services and say, hey, I'd like to know if you have a mental health team. I have an individual who's experiencing a mental health crisis that may need some help. So once that call is initiated, again, you just explain the situation to the best of your ability. you ask for mental health support. They'll be able to tell you whether A, they have a mental health team or not, or B, what their protocols are. In the event they have a mental health team, the mental health team will be dispatched. So myself, I used to work on a mental health team. So as a social worker, I had two permanent officers that worked with myself. We would be dispatched to all the mental health calls. So I would go in. My officers were just really there for the safety component, but I would go in, speak to the individual, do an assessment, and then from there we would make a decision as to whether or not the person can stay in their home or in the environment that they're in, or if we need to take them to hospital for further assessment. Um, so that's one avenue. In the event they don't have it, the police are there to act as peace officers. The way in which you initiate a call will help drive in most of the cases how the police will respond to that person. So I always tell people we have to be mindful of the language that we use. When I'm calling for help, I'm saying I'm concerned for this person. I've noticed this for the last couple of days. They're not like themselves. So I would like somebody to come and support me because this person's having a mental health crisis. A lot of the times things go south when officers are not trained in mental health or crisis intervention, which they should be, or B, when we ourselves are initiating the calls and we don't share that information because we fear that it's going to be put on the person's record, and next time the police come, they're going to think that this person has a mental illness. No, you know, when you're initiating the call, all those stigmas in a sense need to be put on the back burner because you're doing it because there's a safety concern, right? So we have to articulate that there is a mental health concern. When you describe that there's a mental health concern, when the police or the emergency responder, so it could be EMS as well or fire, when they are coming into the situation, they understand that this person may not be in touch with reality. So their approach has to be different versus if you're calling the police and saying, hey, there's a stranger in my house, I'm scared. They're coming in with force, right? Versus more of a therapeutic approach that they may take with a mental health individual. So, like I said, the police may come or they may have a mental health team. If the mental health team or the police come, like I said, an assessment's still done and the decision is made either whether a person needs to go to hospital or not. In the hospital system now, I think the biggest misconception is that take them to the hospital, they're going to keep them, everything will be fine. So in all honesty, the hospital systems are broken. I've worked in the hospital systems for years, and one of the things that I can say is that they're broken. They're very disjointed in that what people actually need is not readily available until it's to the extreme measure. And I think a lot of us can empathize with that sometimes you have to go to the hospital 2 or 3 times before there's more testing done or before whatever symptoms you're actually feeling are really investigated to the best of to your satisfaction, I would say, right? So it's the same thing when it comes to the mental health system, right? An individual can come to the hospital system, and say, hey, I'm experiencing a mental health crisis, or they can be brought in by the police or their family and say, I'm experiencing a mental health crisis. I need some help. An assessment will be done. Just because an assessment will be done does not mean that a person will be held at the hospital for further observation. The only time that individual will be held at the hospital for further observation is in the event that the person is threatening suicide and has a plan. So if somebody says, I'm going to jump off a bridge, but there's no bridges. They live in a place that's farmland. There's no bridges. That person's not going to be held. In the event that the person lives in a city, downtown, where there's a lot of bridges, there's a lot of train tracks, the likelihood that they're going to be kept is a lot higher. So when we talk about people can threaten suicide, but it's the intent behind it and it's their means to actually fulfill what they are threatening. So if somebody is threatening that and they actually have the means to fulfill what they are threatening, they will be held. If they are threatening risks of a harm to somebody else, so if they're threatening that they will hurt, whether a family, a friend, or even just a stranger, they will be held. And if the person is exhibiting just their inability to care for themselves. So inability to care for themselves is kind of a gray area, but what that really means is that case in point A person is out of touch with reality. So let's say a person is experiencing psychotic symptoms. So this person's hearing voices and they're doing things that are a little bit bizarre. Okay, that's an inability to care for themselves. Or in the event you see a person, it's summertime, Sorry, it's winter time and the person's outside in a tank top and a t-shirt in -40 weather. That's their inability to care for themselves because they're not rationally thinking. So those are the three criteria in which a person will actually be held against their own will by legislation, right? And it's pretty standard across board anywhere you live in different countries. I've worked a little bit in Europe. It's the exact same there as well, right? Um, if a person has a diagnosed mental illness and um, the family or whoever is bringing them in can prove that this is not their baseline, this is not how they are every single day, despite their mental illness, that person can also be held. Okay. Being held for observation. So there's usually two different routes. So one, the first thing will happen is that an individual will be held for at least 48 to 72 hours for observation by a psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist will either deem whether this person needs to stay longer or if it was just kind of like a brief, mental health episode. Um, if a psychiatrist deems that a person is having a brief mental health episode, they'll probably just kind of, refer them back to their family doctor or just tell the person like, okay, you recognize that, something was wrong, but today you're better. I'll let you go home. If you need anything else, come back. Right. And if, an individual is exhibiting extreme measures and the psychiatrist says no, then they'll keep them for either 2 weeks or more. I find the problem is that a lot of individuals who are struggling with mental illness fall in that gray area, fall in that area where they're having symptoms, they're not feeling themselves, um, they're not unwell enough to be held at the hospital, or they are held, but they're only held for about 48 hours because they're still kind of level headed. They're still kind of rational thinking, right? They're still level headed. They can still articulate themselves in a way that the doctor feels comfortable sending them home. The majority of us fall in that gray area. And the struggle is that the medical system is not set up to support individuals like that. So that's where these outpatient services come in. Like I said, there's a lot of agencies in the community that offer free counseling, either online or in person. In person right now, I think we know in light of the pandemic and the things happening in the world, we're unable to access. There's a lot of people that have transitioned to online, and you don't even have to live in the same city, same country to access them. So there's that. Sometimes if a lot of people go through spiritual counseling, right? They meet with religious leaders, and a lot of these religious leaders have trainings in a lot of the things. So either trauma informed care as well, right? Because some people may be more comfortable, with that religious component in conjunction with the therapeutic models, right? So there's that. There's groups. There's group sessions. A lot of people are not 100% comfortable with either engaging fully with let's say with a counselor, but they're like, okay, I think if I can kind of go meet with a group, I may be a bit comfortable. I just want to get a feel of things. Group sessions are great, right? And then, last but not least, there's other things that we can, like I said, we can do telephone things, right? We can do telephone things, and there's apps, right? The great thing about technology and the internet nowadays is that our handy dandy cell phones, there's so many apps out there. There's apps, there's things on websites that we can do that can kind of help us in the interim, right? But like I always tell individuals, an app is not going to take away or is not going to cure you of whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment. It's okay to go to counseling. It's okay to speak to a counselor. That doesn't mean that it's forever. A good counselor sees a person honestly for about 6 to 8 sessions, right? And a lot of people think that counseling, oh my gosh, I'm going to see a counselor for the rest of my life. No, right? A good counselor allows a person to identify what's going on within themselves and gives them the tools so that they are able to kind of do the work on their own later on. So in a sense, I kind of equip you to become your own counselor, right? That's the whole point of counseling, is for me to highlight things for you to understand those things and then be able to kind of work through them and give you the tools to work through those things. So a lot of and there's no guilt or shame behind accessing counseling, right? I think counseling has evolved in so many ways, especially in the 21st century, that there's different types of counselors, right? And a lot of, I want to say the majority of our counseling services, what we do is we do a thorough intake, right? So if you come into our services, we ask you a series of questions, right? And I know sometimes it's hard telling your story over again to another individual. But again, we ask these questions because there's so many areas that we can address, right? Whether it be trauma, right? Whether it be, emotional dysregulation. There's so many different areas. Whether it be, brief service, right? There's different areas that can be addressed. And again, through our questionnaires or through our thorough intake, we're able to kind of identify where the key problems are and who would be beneficial or who you should continue being supported by. Like I said, outside of that, there's also, you can there's different avenues, right? You don't have to go to one counseling over the other, but I always encourage individuals. I'm like, you find what works best for you. And when you do engage in services, one of the things that we need to understand is just because you start a counseling service doesn't mean that you have to follow through with it to the end. I always encourage individuals to take a couple to at least attend at least to the minimum 3 sessions. At least go for 3 sessions. After the third session, if you and that counselor, there's just, you don't jive, maybe there's no that relationship's not there, you're not really feeling it, that's okay. Right? Then you look for something else because then you know that you've tried this avenue and it wasn't useful, so you're trying something else. In the event that something does work, then you can kind of take it further. But I always tell the individuals at least try it for 3 sessions because by the third session you kind of get a feel as to whether or not you and this individual can relate on certain areas, on certain fronts, or if you yourself you're ready for it. Because a lot of us feel as if I may encourage somebody else to go to counseling, but they may not be ready, right? So if I take you to a counseling session and you're not ready, you're not going to benefit from it, right? So maybe there's other things this person needs to do, or there's other things that we need to do for ourselves before we actually engage. Again, counseling is not the only thing. It's only one minute area of the mental health system that we can access. But like I said, there are so many areas of the mental health system, from counseling, from medication, from group therapy, so many various areas, right? And again, no two experiences are the same. So I want us to understand that, right? Just because maybe I have a diagnosis of depression, or I'm experiencing depression and I went to a counselor and I feel better, doesn't mean that that's going to be the same for maybe my sister, right? If she's ever experiencing the same symptoms, because again, we're two different individuals, and there's so many factors that contribute to our wellness path, right? Again, our mental health is not solely based on our ability to kind of rationalize things, but it's all the other things that we do. And I know that for your group, like last week, you guys were talking about like wellness, like holistic wellness, right? That's a key component to our mental health, right? Is our ability to stay holistically well, right? And holistically well means not only is your mental health in good state, but your physical health, right? Your spiritual health, your emotional health, all of that encompass is very important because again, when somebody's physically ill, and if you have a physical ailment and you're physically ill, that is going to affect your mental health. And I think sometimes we discredit that piece. We're like, oh, that's my physical stuff. No, but your physical stuff will affect your mental health. And you're just like your mental health will affect your physical health. So we need to understand that the approach to mental health is a holistic approach. It's not just one way. It's not a linear path. It's not one or the other. It has to be in conjunction um with your entire being, right? So I always tell the individuals, right now in light of the pandemic, what things are you doing for your mental and your physical health that can kind of keep you grounded? I understand, we're supposed to be staying home, but what small things can we do in and around our home, right? Can I go for a walk around my block? Can I do some exercise downstairs in my basement? Can I do some exercise in my living room, right? What kind of things? And sometimes it's just nobody's asking you to run a marathon. Sometimes it's like 30 minutes of your time. You like dancing? Dance in your living room, right? Put some music on, watch something on YouTube, dance, right? Just to get the juices flowing. It's not only physically good, but mentally, it kind of helps release a lot of that stress that's on you for the day, right? Or that's been compounded on you for the last couple of weeks. A lot of these things, again, that I think that we can incorporate in our day-to-day life that kind of help keep us grounded, we discredit, right? Why do we stop doing the things that we enjoy, right? Maybe we may not be able to do it to the entire capacity, but again, we can do it in small increments, right? I love reading, right? I used to be a part of a book club. We used to meet together in person, but you know what? That hasn't stopped me from reading. I remind myself and I allocate a certain amount of time a day to read, right? And it doesn't mean I have to read like I have to buy myself a book, but there's so much material online, right? I can read that if I don't have a book, right? Um, just different things, right? Pick up a new hobby, right? A lot of these things help with our mental health because again, You can come and you can come and meet with me. You can meet with a counselor. You can meet with a doctor. You can take medication. You can do whatever it is. But again, at the end of the day, a lot of it comes back to what kind of things do we enjoy and how do we keep all of these things in, how do we intertwine all of these things together to ensure that we are holistically well, right? So it's not about doing one or the other. Some A lot of the times it's about doing them together, right? And I really want to stress that piece because I know a lot of times when people ask for mental health supports, it's like, okay, I just need a counselor. It's like, okay, that's one piece. But I also need to understand, like, are you stressed at your work? What kind of job do you have? Right? Are you stressed at your work? What kind of things can you do at work to kind of help maybe reduce your stress level so that when you do come to the sessions, you're not as stressed, you're not leaving better, but the next day you're back to ground zero. Right. So it's about looking, we have to really analyze and challenge the different areas in our life and ensure that we are well. Okay. I mean, like I said, there's a lot when it comes to mental health, but I want us to, I really want to encourage us to be able to reach out. Like I said, there's so many ways, and a lot of these platforms are anonymous. And and as a good professional, it's knowing that everything that I do is confidential, right? You always want to ensure that the person you're speaking to, that everything that you say to them will be kept within. And again, it goes without saying, right? But I always tell people it's okay to ask them. It's okay to say, hey, where's my information going? If I share this information with you, where is it going? That's absolutely fine. You are in charge of everything that belongs to you, right? So if you are sharing or you are trusting somebody to put that information out there, it's okay to ask where it's going, right? And I think that that's one piece of the power that we can kind of keep within ourselves, right? That's a piece of power that you hold on to and that you are deserving of. Right. So it's okay to ask those questions, but it's also okay to reach out and ask for help. Right. I think there's so many things that are happening around the world that when it comes to racialized people, that nowadays I think we're seeing the effects of it, right? Doesn't mean a lot of these things haven't been happening before, but a lot of things are being televised now, right? There's more awareness. We have social media, we have the TV, we have cell phones, we have everything to kind of put everything live, right? Like just like this platform, right? We have live sessions where we can talk about things, right? And because things are being more televised, means that there's more we're able to find more groups, or we're able to find more common ground with individuals who share various lived experiences, right? But I think a lot of it is our willingness to engage, right? So like I said, it's the world is changing, times are changing, right? And engaging in supports doesn't mean that you're any less of a person, right? If anything, it's you exerting your power. It's you exerting, your the knowledge that something is off, right? I may need some help, right? Or acknowledging about somebody else and saying, hey, I've noticed this about you. I care about you, but I've noticed this about you. Do you want me to be a part of that journey? Do you want me to go with you? Do you want me to help? Right? Because that means a lot. Because the journey is always easier when it's shared, right? So if you have those supports, if you have those individuals in your life that you can share that with, absolutely engage in them, right? And reach out together, and that's okay. And then if you go off on your private journey after, that's okay, right? But it's about taking that first step, right? And that first step doesn't have to be face to face, like I'm saying. It can be just an email to one of these services, right? And just picking their brain and asking some questions, right? It can be informal conversation with your family doctor, right? It doesn't have to be anything formal, but an informal conversation with your family doctor to kind of get a feel of what's actually out there, right? Or a conversation with your pastor and saying, hey, I've been kind of feeling like this, like what are your thoughts? What do you propose I do, right? And it's okay to ask those questions, right? And again, a lot of us, there's a lot of alliances out there. A lot of us are out there to kind of be that resource person for you, and give you guys that information, as to be able to ensure that you guys, that everybody is at their best, right? So don't ever feel as if you're alone in this journey, because you're not, because every single individual in this world will struggle with mental health at one point in their life. Whether they seek help or not is a different situation, but every single individual will struggle with their mental health at one point in their life or not, right? So you're never going to be alone. You're never isolated. Whether it's accepted in your communities or not, doesn't mean that it's not experienced. So acceptance and experience are two different things, right? So we need to take away that guilt and that shame component and really empower ourselves, because when we are at our best, everybody else, it shows with everybody else. Okay. So that's kind of all I have to say. Like I said, if there's any questions, Pastor B, like if you have any other questions, you want to put some of them up, I can answer them.
All right, all right, all right. Alice, thank you so much. This is a
Hmm.
load of information. So, friends, can we
Hmm.
start putting in the chat the questions that you have so that we can get some questions from Alice? If you can put your questions in right now so I can read them out. I know that many of you had questions that you wanted to send, but you were taking in all the information first. But
Hmm.
before I get to the questions that will be coming here, I have one question here for you, Alice. So, in your
Hmm.
experience, what have you identified as the main triggers of mental health crises and episodes in your experience?
So in my experience, one of the main things is actually trauma that has not been treated in the past.
Okay.
And when we understand what trauma is, a lot of times when people think of trauma, when we think of a traumatic event, we think of this big event. Trauma is not always a big event. And again,
Mm,
a traumatic experience, the way in which you, Pastor Obi, may experience something may be traumatic versus the way in which I experience. So we can be in the same event at the same time, but the way in which you experience and the way I experience it are going to be two different things, right? So a lot of mental health episodes are usually precipitated by some sort of traumatic event. So whether that be something that's happened in their childhood that was never spoken about, never addressed, or something that happened last week, right? And again, when I say trauma too, it's also trauma to the body. So that can also be it can be something that was taken in. So a traumatic event for a mental health crisis may be, somebody engaged in some sort of substance, right? You went out with friends, you drank something, and you just didn't sit well in your body. That is also a traumatic experience. Whether a person ingested a substance via smoking or IV, doesn't matter. Again, it's all part of the trauma experience. But like I'm saying, I really want to stress that the traumatic experience is unique to the individual. So how you experience it and how I experience it is going to be two different things, but that is usually the precipitating factor to any given mental health episode.
all right. All right.
Hmm.
So, friends, we want you to start sending the questions. We all witnessed something as a people. I remember a couple of months ago. I don't know if you remember. I believe all of us still remember the George Floyd incident. We watched it on television. I remember that my son sneaked out and saw it on television and saw the policeman with his knees
Hmm.
on George
On
Floyd's
his
neck.
neck.
And I remember we were at the dinner table on the one Sunday, and my son he said something that it stuck with me, and it's still something that I so he asked me this. He said, "Daddy, um, am I gonna be? Is a police officer gonna put his
Knee
knee
on
on
my
my
neck.
neck and kill me?"
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So you talking about we experience trauma differently, and we can all observe or go through the same experience and be affected differently. I wanted to
Hmm.
really have you shed some light on events like that as a
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
what it does to us, right? Because
Yeah.
somebody might be on here and might be saying, you know what, Pastor, this really has nothing to do with me.
Hmm.
And in the church we
Hmm.
have scriptures. Let the weak say I am strong. Let
I
the
am strong.
and
Yep.
we quote the scriptures, and yes,
Hmm.
scriptures is true, right?
Hmm.
But it does not negate having to deal with the things that you have gone through, that you
Hmm.
need to get healing for, and you need to get the right
Absolutely.
information to be able to be at your best in facing the real world, right? So
Hmm.
please, can you speak on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that one thing that we really need to understand, like I was saying, is that, as a people, there's a lot of things that are have there's a lot of violences that have been against the black body, right, in general, right, for centuries, right? And I think that one thing we need to be cognizant of is that just because it hasn't happened to you particularly doesn't mean that it does not affect you, right? And again, Pastor Obi is the perfect example, right, of the George Floyd incident, right? It was just, for me, that George Floyd incident was just highlighting the imbalances, or the imbalances of power and the abuse of power of the system, the
Come
white system. Again, when we talk about the system, we're talking about whiteness, right? We're talking about the
on.
white system against the black body. right? And I think that, like I'm saying, is that, thank God for technology, that it was able to be captured, because a lot of the violences that have happened against the black body have not been captured for centuries. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. We see the effects of slavery, right? Regardless whether you're African, whether you're Caribbean, whether you identify as, as African American, African Canadian, we see the effects of things like slavery. We see the effects of colonization on our body. We're divided, right? So just because it happens to one individual does not mean that it does not affect you, because it's that response that was given to George Floyd by the system was a response that was given to his black body. It wasn't because of him as the individual, it was who he represented.
Come on
So I
now.
think we need to
Come on.
yeah, so I think we need to understand that. And I think that once we're able to kind of unpack those things and unpack that, I think that we get away from that, oh well, that's not me. It doesn't affect me, right? Because you may have a brother, you may have a best friend, you may have a partner, right? Who may be a black man, who may be a black woman, right? And the experiences of one can affect many. So we really need to be cognizant of that. And I think that it's difficult, right? And I think now more than ever we're seeing a shift in that dynamic, in that, oh well, I'm not this, so that doesn't affect me. Oh, this doesn't affect my people. Oh, we didn't have those lived experiences. Because again, when somebody sees you first, they see you for the color of your skin. And we're seeing that, right? And again, a lot of people, I wasn't there, but that affected my mental health, because I have six brothers. I
Come
have
on.
six brothers, one of whom's a police officer, right? And I think of these things of even just for himself, is that I'm like, how do you work within a system that oppresses your own
But
people?
it's so
But you
broken.
also, but yeah, that's so broken that
And
oppresses
you
your own
still got
people.
to
But you
keep your
also
job, right?
but you have to keep your job. You have to keep moving, right?
Mm,
So to me, I can't sit here and say that George Floyd did that incident didn't affect me. It absolutely did. I didn't have to be there particularly. I don't have to be American to experience it. But again, as the violence that was exhibited on a black body affects me, because now when I go to work, everybody looks at me like, oh well, Alice, what do you think? Well, because then I become that spokesperson for that
come
black
on
person. And
now.
again, and that again puts a certain level of stress on me to be able to say the right things as a black person, right? So when I'm talking about mental health, again, it's everything that happens in society, whether it be to you personally or other things. Again, there's always that trickling down effect, right? And again, this is a perfect example. So I'm actually really happy that you brought that up. It's a perfect example.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Alice. And
Yeah,
Lady Nancy writes on Facebook, we may all not have mental illness, but we all have mental health, just as we have
absolutely.
physical health. Can you
Absolutely.
speak to that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Again, I think mental illness is just a fancy coin. Just a fancy term to coin certain things. Again, it's a diagnosis. Sometimes people it's a label, right? Sometimes people labels can work to our benefit, but it can also be a detriment to us, right? And I
Mhm.
always, especially within the school system, I always tell parents to be wary of that, because I see that nowadays more is that people want certain labels, because again, we know that certain labels we can use to our benefit, right? To kind of get ahead in life, or
You
certain
get
labels
away
kind of
with
cause
certain
it that
things.
exactly, right?
Hmm.
So mental illness, as we know it, is actually just it's a label, right? Everybody has mental health. I don't need to be diagnosed with anxiety, anxiety disorder, to know that I struggle with anxiety, right? And I think that we need to move away from that. You don't need a formal diagnosis to know that, maybe you may be struggling with a certain area of your mental health. Your mental health, everybody has mental health, right? Just like, just like you said, just like we have our physical health, our physical well-being and our mental well-being is intertwined, right? And that goes without being said. That goes by virtue of being a human being, by living and breathing. You have mental health, right? So mental illness, in all honesty, is just a label, right? I tell people it's just a label. Doesn't mean that sometimes it can work to your benefit, sometimes it can't, right? But it doesn't take away from your lived experiences, right? Within your mental health or your physical well-being.
All right, there you have it. Britannia Thomas from Facebook writes, how can we break mental health barriers, not just in Black communities, but in our homes?
Yeah, I think the first way is to have those conversations, right? I think that we need to open the lines of communications within our homes and start fostering some of these conversations, right? I think that there's a lot of this notion that it's okay, my kids can talk to me, or it's okay, I'm open and I'm free with them. Yes, but have you actually ever sat down and had that conversation with them that, hey, guys, I want to know how it feels to be, a black student at school, or I want to know how you feel like at home if something bothers you. Like, are you actually able to tell me? Or, if this situation was to happen, would you tell me the full truth, or would you just tell me half the truth, and why? Right? I think we need to start having those. It starts from the home, right? They always say charity begins at home, and it really does. It's about how we have those conversations in our confines, because again, home, anybody can live anywhere. Anybody can live in a house. You can live in an apartment, but home is what you create. It's a safe space, right? So somebody being in the confines of their home, whether that be outside, whether it be a tent that they pitch, and they go back there every day, it's a safe space that they identify with. So in order to break down those, how do we have those conversations? How do we break down the barriers? It starts in the home. It starts with the small conversations about, hey, I just want to know, guys, like, I see a lot of these things. What do you guys think about it? Right? What do you guys think? How do you feel? Just let's talk about feelings. And I think that we shy away from thoughts and feelings, especially within our communities, because it's just like, oh, like you said, Pastor Obi, sometimes it's like, you need to man up, right? I have to be a man. I have to move through this. I need to move. Like,
Like
I'll
they
talk
say,
about my thoughts.
the man shouldn't cry, right?
A man shouldn't
Real
cry.
men don't cry.
Real men don't
We
cry.
know
And like,
that's
where
a lie.
exactly? I'm like, where in the world, in the book of ethics, does it say, that men shouldn't cry, right? So it's about having those conversations, and it's about normalizing things like that, right? As we need to start normalizing behaviors and reactions that are human reactions, that are innate human reactions. If somebody's sad, I need you to cry, because if you don't cry, I'm concerned.
Come
Right. So we
on.
need to normalize those behaviors and those, and these innate responses in the home. Because if we can normalize them in the home, it gets easier outside.
Hmm. I think you've said it so well, and for
Mhm,
me as a parent, as a father,
mhm,
and a husband, I always ask myself, coming from the culture we do come from, where
mhm.
we saw, like, my dad was a macho man. Like, I
Oh yeah.
never I never had a I had never had a real conversation with my dad.
Mhm,
Like, it
mhm,
was always whether he's seeing you doing well and he would commend it, say something
mhm.
real, like, brief about it, or you did something wrong and he would really be elaborate about how you should
Yeah.
have done it or gone about it,
Mhm,
right? But
mhm.
and I think that to a greater extent for us as black men, it informs how we lead in our homes. It informs how
Absolutely.
we parent. It informs how we
Absolutely.
even allow conversations in our homes. And
Yep.
um,
It's
with what
cyclical.
you just mentioned, I think if we will be the leaders in our homes, and
Mhm,
it's not easy.
mhm,
Sometimes just
mhm.
starting that conversation alone, it's like you're not sure where it's going, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
when you don't know where that conversation can lead to, it can be a little
Mhm,
uncomfortable. But I think,
mhm.
just like you said, this is
Yeah.
where creating the safe space comes in, where you're
Yeah.
willing to be vulnerable in your own home,
Yep.
where you're
In
willing
your own
to
home. That's
not
where it
be
starts.
always having to be the man. Like, I've cried before
Mhm.
my kids before,
Yep.
and
Yep.
when
Yep.
I
It's
did, my
empowering.
daughter, it had a profound effect on my daughter, where
Mhm,
she's
mhm.
like, Dad, what is
Dad?
wrong, right? And yeah, she came in the room and Daddy had tears
Mhm,
in his
mhm.
eyes, right? And I think that many times, for those of us that come from cultures that all our heroes were macho men, and
Mhm, mhm.
Rambo was the movie we used to watch,
Oh,
right?
yes, yes.
Well, watch Crew with Schwarzenegger those are the guys that we kind of looked up to, right?
Mhm,
But my hope is that there is a man listening. My hope is that
mhm,
there is a father and a husband listening right now,
mhm,
who has not allowed the home to be a space where maybe the kids and the wife can open up and speak and vent and share and really find that not just to be a nice house, but to be a
mhm.
home where
Absolutely.
we do life and we do real life and we keep it real with
Mhm.
each other, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I just to add on to that is, I think we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because
mm,
the conversation around mental health and a lot of these topics is uncomfortable, but it's
mm,
okay, right? I think once we normalize that, and we become comfortable with being uncomfortable, with not knowing and not having the answers, that's okay.
Mm.
right? It
Becoming,
starts there
I love that. Becoming
Mhm.
comfortable with the
With
uncomfortable.
the uncomfortable.
Please,
Yeah.
for those of you that are ready to tweet, get ready. That is a
hmm
tweetable right there.
I'm telling you.
Be
I'm telling you.
comfortable with
hmm
uncomfortable, because many
Comfortable.
of
Yeah.
us we find any space that makes us uncomfortable.
hmm We
We
shy
we
away
shy,
from
we
it.
shy away from it. But one of
Yep.
the things that I've learned in my journey is that you are not gonna grow if you are not willing to step out of your comfort zone,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
A
Yep.
great man once says that there is no growth in the comfort zone, neither is there comfort in the growth zone,
In the
right?
growth zone. Absolutely.
So you've
Absolutely.
got to be willing to
Yeah.
say, you know what, I don't know where this conversation is going to
hmm
lead.
hmm
However,
hmm
I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to find the
Exactly.
resources if I have to. I'm willing
Exactly.
to facilitate a space where we can all learn
hmm
together. As a matter of
Yep.
fact, me being a pastor, being here facilitated this conversation is something that some pastors will chastise me for, because
Yep.
hey, you're supposed to just pray over all the issues.
hmm
And
hmm hmm
mental, just as we deal with physical problems, and we
Yep.
as pastors will allow people to go to the doctor. And we are
hmm
not praying at every sickness, but we allow
Sickness is
people,
cured.
right?
Exactly.
So I
Yep.
believe it's in the same way we should, right? And
Yep.
and
Treat
and
our
and
mental
be,
health.
and be comfortable, even when if
hmm
we feel uncomfortable.
If
That's
you're
a good one.
uncomfortable, absolutely. There was
That's a
another
good
question
one.
here. It says, how do we
Is there a
build
question?
resiliency? Yes. Resiliency
All
is an
right.
important part of mental health. How do we build resiliency in our children? That's a
I
great
believe
question.
that is from Lady Nancy. I'm
Oh,
sure. I know some of the questions where there we
no, that's a
go.
great
I
question.
said it. Yeah, that's my first lady right there. Please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. So how do we build resilience in our children? The first thing is one is providing. So again, I always go back to this is providing that safe space, right? It's creating an environment for your children to thrive in, right? So knowing that, that they're in a space where they're being nurtured. Again, creating a safe space means that you're providing, you know, um, things that the person needs to be able to thrive, right? So we always know about healthy environment, so roof over their head, again, not just a roof over their head, but the fact that there's an ability for them, they're sleeping well, they're eating well, that they're going to bed with the right amount of nourishment, right? Things like that, right? So it's creating that safe space, but it's also emotionally creating that safe space and spiritually creating that safe space within the home. It's knowing that despite that mom and dad have to work long hours, it's when I come home, I'm debriefing, hey guys, how was school? How was school? What happened today? Did you do need extra help with your homework? Okay, you know what? I know it's late. We'll tackle it tomorrow. But it's that checking in, right? I think once we have a lot of that piece, that we're starting to foster these good these safer, these more nurturing environments. So it's creating that nurturing environment in the home. I think by virtue of creating the nurturing environment, resiliency is honestly built by virtue of a person being uncomfortable, sorry, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So there's certain situations where in your children it's about educating them, right? Some of the things that are happening in the world, right? It's about talking to them about it, right? You may not be comfortable talking about it, but it's about talking to them about it, right? And, again, the older I get, the more I understand a lot of the things that my parents used to say to me, right? I used to always get upset. I'm like, oh, my brothers can do everything. They can stay out late and they don't get in trouble, but I always have to come home on time. And my mom's house, you're a girl. That's just it. You're a black girl. You have to come home early, right? The world is not kind to black girls, right? Oh, but I'm with my brothers. You are a black girl. It doesn't matter, right? I need you home early. And again, the older I get is the more I begin to understand why she was saying those things, because again, I see them in a different light. I understand in a different light, right? So I think it's creating those spaces, but it's having these conversations, these tough conversations, right? And again, I my parents did their best with it given the time that I grew up in and the space obviously for them as well. They were new immigrants, they came into a new land. So it's them also navigating their own way and kind of
Mhm.
creating new identities for themselves, right? But again, I think we now that we know better, we do better. Right. So for the next generation, it's like for myself, I charge myself with educating them with that, with having these conversations. Why do I have to come home early? I tell my niece, because you're a black girl, and if this, and you're more susceptible to to these things happening to you than maybe your white counterparts. It's having those conversations, right? So that it's educating them and building a sense of awareness in them. by virtue of building a sense of awareness, again, we're equipping them with the tools so that when things happen, we also have to allow them the opportunity to kind of work through things themselves. But somebody can only work through something themselves when they are given the information. Again, wisdom is knowledge applied. You can have the knowledge of something, but if you do not apply it, you are not wise.
Come on.
Right? So we have to give our kids the knowledge and allow them to apply that knowledge so that they become wise in it. That's how you build resiliency in a person, right? When I give you the information, I give you the tools, I then allow you to go through, to kind of go through some of the working pains. Right? Sometimes it's hard, again, because I think as caregivers, we want to shelter we want to shelter the younger generation. Oh, they fall down, we want to pick them up. Right? But sometimes it's about, it's okay. It's okay that you fell down. That's okay. Just, pick yourself up and continue doing what you're doing, right? It's reinforcing them that whatever happened has happened. How do we move forward with it? Right? And not coddling. Because I think, again, when we coddle ourselves too much, especially children, we develop things that, like, as a social worker, now as a counselor, when I work with people, it's called attachment theory. Right? So individuals end up struggling with attachment, right? So when they get older, it's they build these unhealthy attachments. Like, they need that validation. They're unable to be able to problem solve. Resiliency is really just problem solving. Is the person's ability to problem solve and work through something, right? Because something was always done for them. Everything was done for them, right? So sometimes, like I said, we have to give them the tools, we give them the knowledge, we give them the tools, and we allow them to apply it, right? But you're still there to reinforce it with that nurturing environment, right? So again, like I said, they fail at something, that's okay. Okay, I get that. That doesn't mean I may not chastise you for it, but I'm giving you the tools to kind of be able to better yourself and work through that. That's how you build resiliency. Because again, if everything is always handed to them and always given to them, when they go into the real world, they're going to have a rude awakening, right? When everything is always
That
done for
doesn't
them,
happen in the real world.
it doesn't happen in the real world. And I think one of the things, I seen a lot when I was working. So I worked in some of the rural areas in Ontario. One of the things that I seen was that a lot of the children, they came from affluent families, everything was done for them. So now, that they were older and they actually had to, like, case in point, I had one girl who applied for a job, didn't get the job, and she had a complete meltdown, wanted to die, wanted to kill herself. And I was like, because she's never experienced failure. She's never had to experience failure because her parents did everything for her. So for me, it was going back to something as basic as, okay, do all your friends like everything you do? No. How do you work through that? How does that make you feel? Okay, you're not going to get every job you apply for, but what do? You go back, you want that job, you go back, you get the training that you need to be able to get that job. Right? So it's some of those things, like I'm saying, the resiliency starts in the infancy. I know I was kind of digressing. It starts in the infancy. It's about, giving them the tools, giving them the knowledge, and allowing them to apply it, because that's when they become wise. When you're wise, you become more resilient.
Excellent, and I think that sometimes for parents, if you have more than one child, one of the things that I've discovered is
Mm-hmm.
that each child is different, and sometimes we might have a way we deal with one particular child that
Mm-hmm.
probably does very well with what our expectations might
Their
be
kids
for them,
are. Yep.
right? And for
Mm-hmm.
that reason, when we find the other child who might be different, who might
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit more opinionated, who might
Mm-hmm.
want to, who a little bit strong in their personality, right?
Yep.
And sometimes as parent, if we are not careful, we end up inflicting more harm than good in trying to shape them.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yep.
in trying to chime in on Lady Nancy's question of resilience, building resilience in kids, I think that if parents would really understand that each child is different, right,
Yep.
and find different approaches by which
Mm-hmm.
they would want to nurture their
Yep.
potential and to really
Mm-hmm.
encourage them. That's the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is something that this is a note to myself. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
note to myself. I'm gonna come and listen to it myself so that I remind myself.
No, but it's true. And it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, right? It's
It's
not
fair.
something that happens overnight. It's definitely
Yes.
a work in progress, but it's sometimes I think it's also listening to our children, right? It's also
Hmm.
listening to that younger generation, because I think sometimes when we come down with a top-down approach, we we don't validate, or we fail to validate some of their lived experiences. And again, what happened in my generation is not happening in the younger generation. I see some things happening. I'm like, wow, like this is completely
Hmm.
different. Like I didn't have those experiences, right? So that doesn't mean that it's not real, right? So like you're saying is that it's understanding that no two individuals are the same. Two people can, like you said, you have two children that can grow up in the same household but have two different experiences, right? So we need to be able to validate that and to be able to, like you're saying, be able to kind of like tailor our approaches, right? To obviously navigate and nurture and pull out the potential in the best out of each of them to the best of our ability, and not compare, right? I think because that sometimes it's hard. It's an innate human reaction to kind of compare. Oh well, so and so did this. I need you to do that, right? Because everybody wants the best for their children, but we definitely do see the detriments of comparison, especially when it's too much, right? There's a way in which you can highlight an achievement of somebody else without throwing it in somebody else, in your child's space, in another space, right? And I think that we can highlight those things and kind of use that as motivation for our children to be better.
All right. We have so we have about 5 more minutes to go, and we have a few comments on this side. Carlita Jones from New York says, "Real men cry."
Do cry. Yep.
Um, Lady Nancy says, "Be comfortable with uncomfortable."
Mm-hmm.
Um, Charles Apia says, "Hey, Charles, it's good to have you here, my friend." Charles says, "Good message." And then Lady Nancy says, "Wisdom is applied knowledge." And then uh, Olivia Amwating says, "That is so true. I made that mistake doing everything, and I'm paying for that now." I believe
Never too late.
she mentioned when you were talking about doing everything for the child. I believe that's what she's referring
Okay.
to. And then she goes on to say, "My reason was that I didn't want him to be bullied and wanted him to fit in. Only if I
Mm-hmm.
can turn back the clock."
Back.
Please, what do you say to that?
You know what?
For
I say that it's never too late. Like I
Mhm,
said, I think now that we know better, we do better, right? And it's never too late to invoke change or to advocate for change, right? Nothing like I'm a firm believer that nothing is permanent in life, right? We're always, as humans, we're very agile. We're susceptible to change, right? So it's about, okay, now that we recognize this, now that you recognize this, okay, how do we move forward? Who do I have to get involved? Who do I have to connect with? Who do I have to connect him with, right? To ensure that, that positive change starts to transform. And I think it's also being dedicated to the process, right? Because sometimes
mhm,
we feel defeated, right? We start something and then we feel defeated, and we stop, right? But it's about being consistent, right? We have to be consistent with it and know that, what, like I said, you got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable because it's going to take time. Life is a work in progress, but it's never too late, right? And it's just like, as being a believer, some people can go to church all their life, never believe in God until they're on their deathbed and say, what,
mhm,
Jesus, I accept you as my Lord
mhm.
and Savior, right? So in
Finally,
that same,
right?
it took that person 70 years to get there. That's okay, right?
Mhm,
70 years is not a lifetime,
mhm, mhm.
right? So yeah, it's
So
never too late.
more comments here.
Yeah.
Bless Molly says, "Good stuff." Um, we have Carlita Jones says, "Change is inevitable." Awesome one there, Carlita.
Hmm.
And then Carlita says, "This session was necessary and needed."
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. And then we have another Facebook user says, "It can be difficult to understand stress in children. How do we teach our children to recognize and manage stress?" I'm sure this is Lady Nancy as well. But
Yeah.
please,
Yeah, I think I
that's
think it in all in all honesty, it starts with thoughts and feelings, right? Um kids are very in tune with how they feel, right?
Mhm,
So whether they identify as at a stressful situation or not, you'll be able to gauge a lot from what how a person's feeling by the words that they're using, right? And by their actions. So if your child is exhibiting a certain type of behavior and you're like, this is out of pattern, that's one of the red flags, right? And it's about sitting them down and saying, okay, let's modify this behavior. And when you feel this way, I need you to do this. When I say this and you don't like it, I need you to do this, or I need you to say this, right? It's about kind of reconfiguring, right? And kind of negotiating that with the child. But a lot of it, like I said, to me, it comes back to those discussions, right? With the thoughts and feelings, right? So you have by having a basic conversation, you're not asking them, are you stressed, right? It's but how did that make you feel, right?
mhm,
And when you start with that, how did that make you feel? Whether or not they said I'm sad or mad, they're going to say something that's going to invoke something, that's going to spearhead something in you, that for you, you're going to be able to say, okay, yeah, you know I can see this is probably stressful for my child, and they may not even understand those words. So I always tell people, like, it's about simple words, using simple words, maybe to even kind of like summarize things for them, or even just for yourself, right? Using simple words and saying, okay, yeah, that was stressful for them. Okay, what can I do to kind of help make that process better? And a lot of times children have a lot of the answers within themselves. If you ask them, what can mommy or daddy do to help you next time, they will tell you what they need.
Mm,
I don't think we give them a lot of credit. They will
mm.
tell you what they need, right? And then we, as the adults, as the caregivers, kind of help negotiate that. It's like, okay, well, we can't do that because that might not be useful, but let's try this, right? It's all in the approach.
Excellent, excellent. So, Lady Nancy has one more comment here,
Okay.
and she says, Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity.
Yep.
Parents should support their children to navigate their problems rather than solving it for them." Can you comment on this? And I
Absolutely.
guess this would be, if you can wrap it up
Yeah.
with this, and
Yeah.
also share any information and resource that we can point people to after this
Yeah.
session. That'd be
Yeah.
great. So, two
Absolutely.
minutes.
So yeah, no, so absolutely, I agree that resiliency is the ability for an individual to bounce back from adversity. And like I said earlier, right, is that if as long as we are giving people, or give not only children but even ourselves, the opportunity to exert our problem solving skills, to actually exercise those problem solving skills, we'll see the change, right? Again, it's about not sheltering things and glazing over things, but it's about really um, managing them, head on, right? And like I said, with mental health, it's going to be, it's a journey. It's a journey, it's a process. There's no linear path, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, right? At the end of the day, is that every individual has a unique experience, and it's about validating that. And when we can validate that, we can understand that what may work for me may not work for you, right? But it's about exploring the avenues, right? So like I said, um, something as simple as, hey, starting with your family doctor, or doing an online downloading an online app, and doing some of the online mindfulness things, right? Or calling a 1-800 number, right, and talking to a mental health professional over the phone who has no ties to you, right, who can give you some advice from a vantage point, because that person doesn't have any personal relationship with you, right?
I
There's so many
understand.
avenues, right?
Mhm.
So like I said, sometimes it's as small as that, is it's starting with maybe somebody who you trust, who can kind of help navigate you to the right avenues. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, there's still more questions coming, and,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
time is up. So, so thank you. So we'll take this last question. So, kindly
Okay.
give us some skills for mental well-being from a professional standpoint.
Yeah.
I Yes.
Yeah, so the first thing for me is mindfulness. So when we talk about mindfulness, we talk about meditation. I think a lot of times, a lot of us are not comfortable with the quietness and the stillness, because the world is just very fast paced. So something is mindfulness. So literally, it's sitting down, putting some quiet music, so something more calming, and just kind of being present in the moment, right? Just you're shutting your mind off, and it's something that's focusing on your breathing. You want to count to three, breathe in, hold your breath for three, breathe out for 3 minutes. And honestly, it's the more you do it and the longer you do it, in the beginning, you'll probably be like, oh, this is silly. Give yourself a couple minutes, right? Give yourself a couple minutes to do it. You'll realize how much your stress level just kind of starts to dissipate, and you're like, okay, now I can tackle something else, right? So something is mindfulness. Something, like I said, it's making a list of what things did you used to do that you really enjoyed, that you stopped doing it, and why, right? And how can you get back to that, right? So it's not necessarily one or the other. I'm not saying you have to go to counseling, but it's the small things we can do in our house, right? Physical activity is key. Go for a walk, right? Go for a walk, whether it's inside your house, if you have to do laps up and down the stairs, or if it's you just take a walk around the block, you go check the mailbox and you come back, right? Getting fresh air is so important. Changing your environment. When you're in the same environment every day, it becomes depressing, right? Change your environment every so often, right? If it's once a day or every other day, just get out, take a walk, right? And like I said, just do a self check, right? How am I feeling today, right? Writing down your thoughts and your feelings Honestly, I know a lot of people hate doing it, and even for myself, I hate doing it sometimes, but it's very useful because you'll see a change. I can look back at last week and at what I wrote in today and be like, wow, I'm not in the same place, right? And why is that? So, yeah.
Amazing. This is good stuff.
Hmm.
For me, I think one of the things that I need to do is I need to get a ping pong table and put it in my basement
Do
and
it.
make sure. Because the thing is, my wife plays ping pong and I do play ping pong, and I
See,
want to
do
get
it.
my kids to get on that so we could use that for. And when I get on that ping pong table,
That's
something
it.
comes out of me. I come alive. I
That's
really
it.
do enjoy it. For some of us, when we get in that zone of prayer, something happens. I
Yeah.
love to preach as well,
Yep.
sharing the word of God.
Yeah.
So you've got to find your it.
Yep.
That's really
Find your
what
it.
she's saying here. You got to find your
Yep.
it
Yep.
and really get at it and
Yep.
throw yourself without reservation and enjoy it.
Enjoy
As
it.
long as it's in line with the word of God.
Yes.
I must on that note, Alice, we wanna thank you so very
Thank
much.
you.
This
Thank
has been
you.
such an amazing blessing. It has been beyond informative that you've
Thank
been
you.
able
Thank
to
you. Thank you.
shed light on what we deal with as a people. And I like a quote that was couched in there that mental health is something that we all face. We all do have a mental health. We may not have
Yes.
mental illness, but every single one of us here
Has
have
mental
mental
health.
health, and it is
Absolutely.
good that we do the right things to
Hmm.
promote good mental health in us. And on that note, we are signing off, and
All
thank you all
right.
for joining
Have a good night.
from Trinidad and Tobago, from Toronto, Samantha Method, the Lord
Wow.
richly bless you. From Dominica, Malcolm, the Lord richly bless you. Carly the Jones, United States, God bless you. Olivia, Oakville, the Lord richly bless you. God bless each and every one of you. Britannia
Amen.
Thomas from Brampton, God bless you. Thank you for coming on. It is good to have you here. Daisy Ajaman, it is good to have you here. God bless you. All
Hmm.
of you. Jennifer Kotsuka, hey. Jennifer is one of those that spreads the world, the word to the whole world. Once we come on,
Hmm.
Jennifer, God richly bless you. And I see you are working. I saw a picture, a before and after picture of you. I know you're working, and girl, God bless you.
Nice.
I
Nice.
pray that all your goals for 2021, that God will give you the grace to achieve them. Sister
Amen.
Rona, the Lord richly bless you. God bless each and every one of you. Those that are watching us live now and those that are coming on later to watch, we pray that the information that you receive is helpful to you, and we will see a better version of you before the
Oh,
year
yes.
2021 ends.
Oh,
May
yes.
God richly bless you. Tomorrow morning at
Amen.
6:30 a.m., for those of you that are in the know, that is how we start our day. It is a
Yes.
part of how we start off our day by thanking God, by being grateful for life. And it is the best place to start
It
on
is.
this mental health journey. As
It
our
is.
speaker highlighted, that your spiritual health also affects your mental
Very
health.
important.
So
Yep.
I want to especially invite each and every one of you that are on this journey. Tomorrow is day number 19 of our
Okay.
40 days journey. I'll be
Wow.
speaking with Alice, and I'm hoping that we can do another session before the
Oh,
week is.
absolutely.
If you
Absolutely.
have any questions, if you have more questions, please send the questions to me privately. For those of you that are part of our K.I.M group on WhatsApp and on Facebook, please send the messages, send your questions so that we are able to figure out where the needs are and for our next session, what type of conversation that we need to have. So may the Lord
Okay.
richly bless you. Alice, all the thanks are
Thank
coming
you.
in and people are
Thank
saying
you.
thank
Thank you.
you,
God
thank
bless
you,
you
thank
all.
you,
Thank
thank
you
you.
for the
And it's
opportunity.
good to have you here. God richly bless you.
Yes. Yes.
In a
Yes. I'll be
blessing to
back.
all of us. So, Saints,
Thank you.
God bless you. It is time to go and make a difference in your world. It's impact time.
Amen.
Have a wonderful
Amen.
evening.
Good
God bless
night.
you. Good
Bye bye.
night. Good night. Good night. Bye for now.